You think all your lefty friends that shouted about anti-Semitism when it was connected to Trump, you think they'll be speaking up now? Do you think? We'll start with this. Can you believe that Biden said Nazis are good people? Can you believe it? Joe Biden, the president of the United States, said Nazis are good people. I don't know how everyone in the country isn't up in arms about this. He said Nazis were good people. He did. I heard it with my own ears. He said Nazis are good people. I heard it with my own ears. I heard it. Nothing that you could ever say will convince me otherwise. It doesn't matter if you provide a transcript saying, can you show me in the transcript where he said Nazis are good people? That doesn't matter. I and millions of others heard it. You see, there's very fine people on both sides, and that's the equivalent to saying Nazis are good people. Same thing, right? Now, before we get too far into the sarcasm here, much like every time that the hyperbolic left and their sycophantic followers decide that they're going to intentionally smear people they don't like by saying if they have any sort of nuanced take whatsoever, it means they support the worst of any side of the movement. I understand that the truth is far more complicated than what individual statements would suggest. For example, you could take a swath of people at one protest at one university and say, these people look to be doing something really bad here. Like, let's say hypothetically, by the way, I haven't seen footage that shows this, but let's say hypothetically you say, oh, here is Yale, and here are supporters at Yale. And look, this camera footage is 5 minutes of them beating the crap out of some Jewish guy. And then if Biden's like asked, what do you think about anti-Semitic protesters? What do you think about some of these awful things? And he said, well, I think it's bad. I condemn that. But I also think that, what's happening on the other side is bad as well. Does that mean that Joe Biden's saying, oh, you could beat people, there's some good people there and some bad people? No, that's not what it means. He's saying, in general, the group of people that is upset on one side, they're good and bad people. And in general, the people on the other side, they're good and bad people. So if I could steelman what Joe Biden's saying, he's saying the following. Yeah, of course, there's some of these rhetoric that's going on these college campuses, these anti-Israel protests that we find reprehensible and we condemn. However, we also need to understand that there are behaviors that are occurring on the other side, particularly with a bunch of people dying, perhaps in terrible ways that could be controlled better by the Israeli government, that also is raising temperatures and is worthy of criticism. Now, I know that. And certainly Biden supporters know that. They absolutely know that. But why should my standard be the standard that's used? Because that same standard says, when Trump looks at Charlottesville and says there are good and bad people on both sides, clearly I'm not talking about the racists, the Nazis, the white supremacists. I understand what he means is, oh, he's not saying Nazis are good people. He's saying some of the people that don't want the statues torn down are good people, and some are bad people. And some of the people that want the statues torn down are good people, and some are bad people. And that's eminently true. And I went into great detail for years as to what that statement was really about, if you pulled through the thin veneer, which was that we were lionizing everyone that showed up to Charlottesville against the Unite the Right rally. And those people shouldn't have been lionized. Most of what Charlottesville was shitty people on one side lining up for mutual combat with shitty people on the other side. There were people in both groups that weren't shitty people. But the media wants to paint this picture because the establishment wants to paint this picture that white supremacists are the worst people in the world and they're the biggest threat to this country, and Trump supporters are all white supremacists, and so they could use it for a political point. That's the entire idea. Demonize white people, demonize Trump voters, demonize the right. That's what their agenda is. So they overlook violence on the left and terrible actions on the left so that they could call out people on the right. That's exactly what but Trump said Nazis were good people hoax was about. This was a hoax that was shared so prominently that the now president, Joe Biden, claimed that's the reason he decided to run for office. was the Trump saying Nazis are good people business. So my standard shouldn't matter. What's my standard matter? It's the same standard, by the way, that said, I understood after the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision that there's no right answer to what to do with unaccompanied minors that come to the border, or even, in that case, accompanied minors that come in illegally. I don't want to see them put in cages. I don't want to see them come to the border. But I also don't want them locked up with adults that we can't prove are their family. And I also understand that we can't just have an open border that anyone that comes here with a child is let through the border scot-free. I get that. So when it happened under Trump, I didn't say, this is a moral failing that is disqualifying that this is happening with Trump. And then turn around when Biden did it and say, this is a moral failing that's disqualifying for Biden. Wasn't my standard. I understand it's a difficult situation. I think it was worse, certainly worse under Biden. The reason it was worse was because more people came to the border because Biden and the Democrats virtue signaling on open borders and the rescinding of laws, etc. But why should my standard be the standard that applies? The reasonable standard. Why should that apply? That's not what the people in positions of power. It's not what Joe Biden. Why don't we use Joe Biden's standard when evaluating the words of Joe Biden? Joe Biden said, or heavily implied, that Trump said Nazis were good people, so much so that's the reason he decided to run for office. So, when there's accused of being anti-Semitic protests on college campuses, and Joe Biden's answer is, well, there's bad people on that side, but there's bad things on the other side as well. How is that any different? When's the mainstream media going to, this next meeting, shouting, oh my gosh, you're defending Nazis, you're defending anti-Semites, how dare you do that? Heck, when's Joe Biden going to have a press conference that the media can yell that way? Oh, it's different now. Now it's different. Now it's, well, be reasonable, Rob. This is what he was trying to say. Notice how this works. Joe Biden, from his official Twitter account, which I have no doubt that he doesn't manage, tweeted out, I believe today, that Trump said inject bleach hoax. Trump never said inject bleach. Never said it. And yet there's Biden saying he did it. Now the media was on it. They pushed that hoax as well. And yet, what was more damaging, that or Joe Biden claiming if you get the vaccine, then you can't catch or spread COVID? Which of those lies, which of those statements was more damaging? And yet, no one held Biden to task for his statement. In fact, when you talk to left-wingers, they're like, oh, well, what Biden was saying, when he said if you get the vaccine, you can't get COVID, clearly he didn't mean that. But Trump said drink bleach. No, he didn't. It's another example of the actual words that the left say. Democrats, the media, the establishment, they'll always interpret it in the way that is, all right, I don't want to say just the left, the establishment left. They'll interpret it in, well, let's make it the most charitable possible. Then the exact words Trump says, they say, no, we're not going to look at those exact words. We're going to interpret it in the worst way possible. So, just like I told you, I was on a website after Charlottesville where I had a left-winger say that once Trump made the statement that Nazis could be good people too, that meant that anyone that supported Trump was also a supporter of Nazis. And then they went on to talk about how violence would be justified against those supporters of Nazis, up to and including, I'll just say, a final solution to those Trump supporters because they are clearly Nazis. I wonder if we'll see that same vigor when it comes to Biden's statement. Think we'll see that? You think all your lefty friends that shouted about anti-Semitism when it was connected to Trump, you think they'll be speaking up now? Do you think that every single conference Biden's given, he'll be asked, do you condemn anti-Semites like they did with Trump? Remember that? They asked him, like, I could show you the video of dozens of times Trump was asked, do you condemn white supremacy? And he was like, yeah. But they asked him every time and pretended he didn't do it. You think that Biden will get that treatment? Of course not. Of course it's different. So again, not my standard. My standard is I completely understand what Joe Biden is saying. Passions are inflamed. There could be good and bad people on both sides of these issues. But my standard doesn't matter. Let's use the Joe Biden standard.